Hello and welcome to I think the 43rd episode now of building a 2D game in Flutter with multiplayer support. And last time we basically got the player to move and accelerate with the thrust and the server basically controlling the movement, right? And now we can actually see if you have two games open, I have two games open now. So would be one player, so I can move this guy. Now you can see that there's still a considerable delay, and you can see that there are certain corrections by the server that are due to the fact that we are sending the updated game state at a really high delay, right? We have 1.5 seconds there. So, but what I wanted to show is just that we are now able to see the other players, right? So this is the other player, and you can actually see above here. So this is us, right? And you can see above here what the server thinks where we are. So if you move, for instance, you can see that we move immediately, and then the server kind of kicks in, right? And so if you move back, and then it corrects us to that, right? And that's mainly due to the long delay. So what I'm actually going to do is I'm going to keep this guys running over here, but I will go to the server and I'll just remove this delay just to see like at which stage we actually are if we like have a more realistic delay. So I'm going to go to the game loop, and you can see here that we had a delay of like 1,500 milliseconds. So we are ticking at 20 milliseconds, but we're basically waiting to update the clients every we update the clients basically only every 1.5 seconds, which is very, very, very a long delay. So what we're going to do is we're actually going to change this to 100 milliseconds and save this, and then I'm going to restart the server. And I want to see if these clients, they probably won't reconnect by themselves, or maybe they will. We may have to restart them. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to restart both clients, do a hot restart. And now we have the clients here, right? So now we can actually see, so this is, we are here now, right? And you can see that above there, we get the update of the player changing the angle, right? And now if we move, we can see this is pretty in sync with what we're actually doing, right? And there's still this annoying correction, which we may have to work around. But you can see that this is what the other players would see. They would see us rotating like this. They would see us accelerating, and on the above, it doesn't look at all bad, right? Because the other players only see what the server sees, right, or what the server sends them, right? But in our case, since we are predicting on the client side, we sometimes get weird results where we are rotating and suddenly it rotates us back, and that is mainly due to the fact that we are sending the client inputs only so often, right? Only ever so often, and so then maybe we send a rotation to the server, but the server kind of got a rotation before, and we already rotated further. We didn't send that yet, so the server kind of corrects us. So we're gonna have to see how we can fix that. But I just want to get this into a state where we can actually play, even though we might have some issues still. So now if we move this player, right, we can see on the bottom that actually this player now is rotating. We can also accelerate him, and now we can see how this would look if we were to play with two players. So I'm going to actually close both of these guys. And we're also going to, for now, stop the server, and I'm going to remove this player again from the level, right? Because we can move faster if we just have one player, if we don't have to wait for two players all the time. But I just wanted to basically say, show at which stage we are right now, what's working, and kind of what kind of problems we're running into because of update delays. So basically, again, this is mainly due to the fact that we want to have an authoritative server where we basically trying to simulate the game on the server instead of having the client just tell the server where the player is and so on. And basically, just to prevent cheating, you can see that this actually makes things a lot harder. But in a lot of real games, this is really, really important. And since I wanted to show how to do a realistic game, we are actually going through that. Now, what I want to do now is I want to basically fix this one issue that we had with the player where Basically when the, let's move this over here. When basically the player updated the sprites, we saw that the applied thrust was always false, right? We already figured out why that is. That's because the player controller, which I'm going to open over here, what it basically does is it automatically checks applied thrust to false immediately after after basically recalculating the velocity. So that's why we don't see a we don't see basically the effect of applying thrust. And so we need to think about what we can do about this. So basically also the server needs to do that, right? Because once we apply thrust, we basically need to apply the velocity, but then we don't want to apply thrust again. So here's the thing. The server also would actually need to send, if another player applied thrust, right? We need to see some animation for that other player that the other player applied thrust. So this is not really working very well. So we need to think about how we can do it. So the model, we applied thrust, right? And we cannot immediately set it to false, right? So we need to actually set it to false after the whole game loop completed, right? Because basically what's happening is we are applying thrust, right? The model says it applied thrust, but then we immediately set it to false before we even update our sprites. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to do one thing where I'm just going to remove this altogether. Obviously now we are going to keep applying thrust, which is not a solution, but we're just going to look basically what that would look like, and then we'll think about a better solution. So let's start a client here, and let's see what we get. We also don't want to basically remove the thrust here because that code doesn't run on the server, right? So let's just see what that looks like now. So now we can see, oh, wow, now we keep applying thrust, right? Crazy. So that won't work, right? But you saw that now, at least for a second, we got the animation. So let's keep this running here. Let's get this guy, let's have this guy hitting the corner. Not a big deal. We just keep it running, and whenever we are ready, we'll fix it. So I think what we need to do is, instead of removing the thrust immediately, we need to basically do this somewhere else, and most likely we need to do this in the game loop. And I don't like it, not in the game loop, but basically in the game controller. I don't like this too much. I don't like this super a lot, but basically, maybe what we need to do, instead of having just an update, we also need to have something like an after update thing. So let's actually look at this. So basically what's happening is, if you look at our client game, let's start there. If you look at our client game, we process the inputs, we set the client player, and then we update the game controller, right? So when we synchronize here, our applied thrust should actually still be set. And then we actually go and update. Now, what we almost want to have is like, we almost want to have another thing on the client game where it says clean something, right? And we actually also want that on the server game. So something where the game controller can say, like kind of like a clear states or something, right? Or a cleanup kind of things, where basically after the models were sent, after the applied thrust was basically communicated to everyone, now we want to basically clean up. So we know that, we can, in the next run, we won't apply thrust again and again and again. Another option would be to say that if we update the, if you take the input processor and the we didn't apply thrust, right? Then we actually set apply thrust to false. That would be another option where we say if the key is not pressed, that's when we set it to false. However, that would not work on the server, right? Because the server would not, basically the model on the server would stay in that state that thrust was applied. And then we basically have to send immediately that no thrust was applied. So this is kind of weird. So what I actually am going to try is basically, so we have updates where we update all the models, right? And then we do all these things here. We update the UI and we render and all these things. And then what I want to actually do afterwards, I'm going to have something called a cleanup, right? And we actually make this part of the interface. So here we have the interface where this actually becomes part of the game. So we have a cleanup here, and we shouldn't actually need the canvas for this at all. For now, we're going to keep it as nothing. Let's call it cleanup with the lowercase. So in the cleanup, basically what we'll do, we go through all the players, and we actually in this case we'll call game controller cleanup, and the server will also call cleanup on the game controller, and we don't need these values here. So let's go to the game controller now and add this cleanup function. So void cleanup, and I mean you could call it also reset or something. And actually what we want to do here, we're just going to go through here, go through all our entries, and we call cleanup as well. So we're just forwarding all these things, and now we're going to the player controller, and now you can see where this is going. Right now we're going to have a cleanup here, and that's where we say well, okay, so we need to give it the player model. Okay, so we need a player model, and we start seeing that maybe we need an argument for the cleanup as well. So player, and then we just say player dot applied thrust is false. That's our cleanup that we want to do. Now we did call this here, so we need we just need to say we need to give it x dot. So let's see, in the entries, the value maybe, yeah. So this should be okay, fine, right? So now we do cleanup here, and that should solve it on the client at least. So obviously now we need to call this. So we need to figure out where are we calling render and all these things. So in the game widget, we call this we paint. So we need to do this after we paint, right? So let's just look at where we do the okay, so the paint is happening. Huh, interesting. So the paint. Okay, so the game render doesn't happen, like we don't control when the game render happens, but we do control when we update the basically in the game, right? When we update the inputs, right? Or like the UI, we have this update UI thing. Let's actually look at it. So we have the update UI, and then once we update the UI, we say cleanup. And so at this point, like even though we didn't apply thrust, now when we update the UI, this actually does cause the sprite to get rendered, and or like it gets to at least prepared. So when the render happens, it gets rendered. So it's a little unideal. I want to see how this works now, though. So if I do this, we get the, okay, so we didn't, okay, so it's just that our thrust seems to be, we only apply thrust, it keeps applying thrust. Okay, so that's not, until I get an input. Oh, that's interesting. Until I give it some other input. So, oh, that's because the server doesn't have that cleanup yet, right? So basically, we need to actually stop our server and say the server game loop also needs to call the cleanup method. So let's find the game loop. We just had it there. So when the server basically does when we're basically ticking, right? And we are basically saying, saying game controller update. So we get the game state. Then we send the game state, possibly. So at this point, now we are kind of already added the game state. The thing is, though, that we need to be sure that this is actually happening synchronously and that we can't just like then modify. So let's see what, I'm a little bit afraid that we call this method, right? And right afterwards, we are doing a cleanup. And so that might not work really well, because then we're sending it and then we're modifying it, and maybe it gets modified before it gets sent. So because we're adding this, and then whoever is listening to this game state stream might not have it packed yet. So let me see. Okay. So this is where we are packing it, right? I mean, you're going to try it. I hope that we are not doing anything weird by modifying it. But what I'm trying to get is, like, it might still hold the reference. By the time we change it, now finally it starts sending it. So we might have we might never see the other players thrust fire. But we'll see about this. So what we'll do is, after we send the game state and schedule another, actually before this we can say game controller dot cleanup. Right. So now on the server we are also resetting this thrust to false, right? Because you saw what happened basically. Until I moved something, the server still thought that the player applied thrust the whole time. So we need to clean up here. Another option would be to apply it at the beginning of each tick. That's another option that we have that might actually work as well, right? Because we first clean up. No, but that wouldn't. No, actually, that wouldn't work. Well, it would. Let's look at the player controller actually. So the player controller, right? We're saying if player applied thrust, right? So now if we happen to clean up before this, that won't work. But the thing is, we also have to think about when this gets called, and it gets called here, and so right, it gets called here in the game state, and in the game controller. And that gets called right after we applied the, but this gets kind of hairy, right? Because this gets called in the client game, it gets called after we actually applied the input. So that would mean that even if we called cleanup before this, now the inputs would be processed and would send it to true. But we'll keep it like this for now, and we'll see if this works actually. So let's do a hot restart here. And now the server is also doing the same thing the client does. Okay, so now we saw, okay, so now we can see that we see it thrust, right? And we see it apply. And so this looks okay. I'm a little bit weirded out. It's like the way that the thrust works. So you see like how the rotation is really weird, because the server gets updates not quite as often as we get updates, so the rotation is not. But it might be because we actually set the, in the game props, let's look at that actually. In the game props, we set this to really, yeah, okay, time between thrusts is 500, okay. But the player input sync interval is 100, so actually that should be fine. In the input synchronizer. So the input synchronizer is updating every 100 milliseconds. And we might actually make that a little smaller, and then we probably see some better results. So let's say we can set every 50 milliseconds, because we also have to think about the round trip time and stuff. So if I hot restart this, see what happens now. It might look a little better. Okay, so this looks already better. It's not 100%, but this basically comes due to the fact that we are predicting on the client, we are already rotating, and then the server gets the value of the rotation, and then it kind of starts its own you know, like simulation. And the thing is, since everything is kind of out of touch with time, the server gets the basically the state of our player a little later, then that causes some problems. Okay, cool though. I think that's fine. What we'll do is we're gonna go back to our level, and what we'll do, we add another player. So I want to see if now I can see the other player applying thrust as well. So let's see, level, simple level. All right, so what we're gonna do is we're gonna put this other player back in here, and I'm gonna hot restart this guy, and he will wait. Oh, actually no, he won't, because the server we need to restart first. Server doesn't know about the level yet, so let's hot restart, and let's do add another player. So now this guy's waiting. And all I want to see is if already we see the other player also applying thrust, right? That would be ideal. So that would mean we basically have it pretty much fixed. Let's see. Okay, we got one player. Oh, we need to maybe. Okay, so for some reason we only have one. Okay, so now we got two players here. So now this is one player, and this guy is still waiting. I don't know why. Is there another one? Maybe. Nope. Let me just close this guy, and we'll just restart both from scratch. Alright, so now we should only have the server running. We'll start one player, and then we start another one. But we'll do it piece by piece, because I want to see. Okay, so why? I think what's happening is we actually need to restart the server. The server is in a weird state right now. So now this is actually better. I think what happened is when we hot restarted this guy, tried to reconnect again. So actually what I'm going to do is stop everything, even the server, and then start from the beginning. Start the server, and then we'll start each client separately. So server's running, okay, and now we'll start this client, second one, and then we'll start the first one again. Because remember, like whenever a game gets started, right, and like we get enough players, the server says, okay, now we are running. And I think what was happening is like the first player was connecting twice, so the server thought now there were two players. So now we start another one. So this guy's now waiting for players. And let's see, second one. And I just basically, if we see both thrusts, okay. So now I'm here. So now we can see this player here. I want to see if here I get an animation of thrust as well. And I didn't. I only get it here. That's most likely because the server doesn't communicate doesn't communicate correctly. So that might actually be okay. What I'm going to do is I'm going to on the server in the game loop, I'm just not going to clean up, which means most likely our players will go crazy, but we should see the thrust one time. So we have waiting for players. And we have waiting for players. Okay. So actually, what we need to do, we need to restart both of these guys. Okay. So now, who am I here? Okay. So now I want to see that I'm going to go crazy because now we're not cleaning up. But I want to see if here we see at least one time a thrust. So let's see. Nope, we didn't. So it's something else. It's something different. So we're gonna look at that. So why didn't we send? So let's just remove this guy. When we basically send up the players, right? We need to. So we don't need this anymore, by the way. Sync player inputs as something else. Whenever we're sending up the the game state, it should actually show that one of the players applied thrust, right? So I'm not sure why that's not happening. Because basically all that's happening is that our own player is showing the thrust animation. Or maybe it is actually sending it up and it's just not animating it for some reason. So we'll see. Let's actually look through that a little bit. Let's go back to client game. So what we're doing here is whenever we update, we basically, at this point we are synced, right? So here we have all the players. We're updating their sprites and we're going with the entry values. So that means if the player applied thrust, we would reset the thrust sprite of that player, which means it would apply thrust. So each player basically has its own thrust sprite, right? So they should actually show up. So what probably is happening is that we don't have, we somehow don't get the game state from the server with the thrust applied of like opponent players for some reason. And here's the problem, I think. I see the problem. So we are saying maybe send game state, right? But the thing is, if the messaging interval hasn't passed, we're just going to keep, we're just going to ignore that message. And then by the time we actually get to send the message, now our thrust is already like expired, right? So now we don't see that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to decide to not worry about that at this moment. It's not so important to see the other player thrust, but I'm going to put a to do here, right? To do. Something like this, right? So player applied thrust, forgot my, because basically what's happening is we have a game set with a thrust, but we're saying that we haven't elapsed our time yet. What we also could do, we could say every time a player applies thrust, we're just gonna broadcast that. Actually, that's not a bad idea. So basically we can say if basically this game state has an important event that we need to communicate, so that's actually a good solution. We'll do that. So basically we're going to go to our game state. And what we're going to do is we're going to have some method where it's just going to say, it's like a getter bool should send immediately. Okay, and so, oh, is it complaining? There is a function body, so maybe I'm doing this wrong again. I can never remember the order of things in these languages. Okay, so now what we can do here, we can say, we go through all the players, right? And here actually, we go to our players, right? So we're going to go through all our players for in players the values. I think that's what we do. And we just early exit if we find something that is worthwhile. Otherwise, we return false here, right? And then we say if any of the players has applied thrust, right? If p dot applied thrust, return true. So immediately, if anyone applied thrust, we know we should send this. Okay, so now. And then we say and not game state dot should send immediately. Then we return. All right, so that should work better. So now if we restart the server and we restart, how to restart our clients, we should actually now see the other player applying thrust, right? Because we always send the message even though our time may have not been expired. So basically, we now basically have this new way of doing things like we're sending messages regularly about the positions of the players, or if something urgent is happening, basically, right? So let's see, we should have 2. Okay, cool. So that put here. Now I'm going to hot restart this guy, and then we're going to hot restart the other guy. All right, so now I'm going to do this. Okay, now we should see the thrust. I'm pointing. We should see the thrust over here. So let's see. Do we see it? No, we don't. Why not? Why are we not seeing this? Oh, let's just see. Maybe when we sync, we don't sync all the things. So let's just look at the... And I never can remember where we have this defined. What I'm going to do is I'm going to put a conditional log here. Oh, here is something. If not synced or sync only once, sync only once is false. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to say that if player dot apply thrust, we're going to log out the player. Right? But basically, yeah, so basically we want to see like how we can do this. So basically we're going to say player or we just say player.toString. Okay, so now what we have to make sure, oh, this has to be on like whatever debug or something or dot fine. Okay, so what we'll have to do is we're going to hot restart both of these guys, and then we're gonna have to see. So so this is I don't know who's who. This is a problem, right? So okay, so this, when we move this, so now I'm gonna apply thrust, and we should get the thing printed out in both, because we're gonna get it for ourselves and for the other. So we apply thrust. And we only got it here. Oh no, that doesn't make sense. I want to turn off this input synchronizer thing. And this is where our logger is kind of falling down. I would like to have a logger where I can say, I want to see, you know, I want to see this log about this category and not the other one. So I think now if we fast restart this, should actually be fine. So okay, so so now we got 2 here. So we apply thrust here. All right, and we don't get a log message ever. So basically we never seem to get from the server the message that that the player is applying thrust. What I'm going to do is I'm going to go to the game loop. I'm going to look here. I'm still wondering, maybe because of this cleanup, that's what's causing problems, right? Because we basically... So what I'm actually going to do is I'm going to put this cleanup in a different place. I'm going to put this here. So this is weird because we're doing it in a different order on the client and the server. Maybe we actually will change that to match on the client. But this might be actually the problem, that we are not sending it before we actually then change it already. So basically, right, we are scheduling it to be sent, but then we actually modify the game state before it actually was packed and sent. So the other option obviously is to pack it right away. So let's see, now I'm going to apply thrust. Okay, so now this cleanup is causing more problems. Yeah, that's obviously, yeah, because we are cleaning up now the fact that, okay, so that's the problem. So we're cleaning up the fact, we got the message from the client that we applied thrust, and then we're cleaning up, which means then like we never apply the thrust because so this doesn't work either. This is kind of annoying, to be quite honest. I think the main problem is that we are kind of mixing events with state. So the player applied thrust is kind of like an event versus the like the velocity and all these things are state. And so the velocity we don't change willy-nilly, and we don't change the position willy-nilly. That's all part of the game loop. And so now I'm realizing I probably should have checked this code in. So basically what do we do? We don't clean up here. Or we just keep this here, and we just say it doesn't really work. So, but this thing here doesn't work because, I mean, the only other option that I see is I mean, I don't like this whole mixing of events and states. So we might have to fix that. But the other thing is that when we add the state, we might actually pack it, because we're only actually adding it here if we're also sending it. So we wouldn't be doing any extra work. So what I want to see, so the only reason why I didn't want this in here is because I didn't want to have the game, the game loop shouldn't have known anything about the packing. But it seems like otherwise we'd have to basically kind of like clone the game state. I mean, one way to do this obviously is like to pack and unpack it really quickly. So for now, we're going to actually do that. We're going to just say, I think a clone method is not bad. And so what we'll do is, so we don't have so many things. So maybe we can teach all these models how to clone themselves. So basically what we're going to have is we're returning a game state with the players equals, basically we're going to clone all the players, right? So final players equals players dot map right, and we obviously still need that method. And then the bullets, the same thing. Bullets is bullets map, and that is much cleaner because we don't want to. And we need those clone method anyway. So even if it ends up that this wasn't the solution, this clone method will be useful. So let's see, BBC. So this is, okay, so this is a, yeah, so this is a list, so that works. The players we cannot really map like this because it is a map, so no pun intended. But basically what we need to do is I'm going to create a players map. And then I'm just going to say for it's going to be okay, in players something like that. So I'm not sure why it's complaining. Okay, so let's see. Okay, so entry dot, yeah, okay. So it doesn't have a clone method yet, so that's why it's complaining. And then basically what we'll do the players is basically the cloned players. And so let's just be consistent and call this the cloned bullets. And we assign the cloned bullets. Why is this complaint? Because it's final. Okay. All right. So what I want to do is then take this as, yeah. So let's do this. And let's make those all optional. Fault value must be constant. Okay, so that won't work. So what we'll have to do is we have to take these as parameters, and if they're null, then we'll just use this. And if they're not, we'll, because I don't want to make them not final, because I don't want everyone to just be able to change, like reassign them and stuff. So now we can say that it's going to be the players, and if they're not defined, then right, and if they're not defined, then it's this. And so now obviously we need to make those optional. All right, so now all the other code still works, and now here we can actually say that we create a game state of clone players and clone bullets, and then now it's still final. Now let's see what is complaining here. Map bullets.map. It's a list. Probably needs to be to list. All right, so all right, it's still not happy. It should be pretty clear what this is. Okay, so it's probably confused because we don't have clone methods on these yet. So now I'm going to implement those real quick. All right, so what we'll do is we return basically, so we have all these values that we basically just need to give it. So the ID is the same. The top position, we'll create a new one. So basically anything that is a reference we have to basically clone. The angle is a double, we can keep it. The velocity we need to clone. Applied thrust, we keep it. So so basically just return a player model, and we say this. So let's start from the beginning. So we have the ID is basically the ID. The top position is a new top position, or maybe we just add a clone method here. Oh, we have a copy with, so we can just basically call copy with here and pass nothing, and then that will basically give us a new top position with the exact same values. So that will work. Dot copy with, and give it nothing. Then we need the angle, and we can just, again, this is like a scalar value, so we don't need to copy. No one can actually mess with it. So the applied thrust is applied thrust, right? So basically these get copied, right? The scalar values get copied automatically, so we don't need to clone anything there. The velocity, we need to basically, is there a velocity you could clone? Copy with maybe? Nope. So we just create a velocity with the same values. All right, so why is it? Oh, it needs to be an offset. All right, so we got that. So now we're cloning the player model, and then we have the required. Why is it complaining now? What are you talking about? I'm really confused why suddenly this we didn't even change anything about this. Oh, okay. So we imported something, probably offset. So oh yeah, we don't like this opportunity thing. I don't know why that got imported. Yeah, okay. So now I think we're better off. Yeah, good. I don't know how and why in the world this got imported. So now we got the player clone. Now we still need the bullet model clone. So this is very similar. We should say bullet model clone, and also we could actually do a copy with if we ever needed it. So clone is kind of like a copy with, except that you can't pass any overrides. But for now we don't need it, so we just leave it as is model, and we say that the top position is basically this top position. What's wrong here? Dot copy with. And then the velocity is the same as we had before. We just do offset. And we take our velocity, dx, and dot dy. All right, so now we got a nice cloning for the bullet model. And now let's see, our clone method here should now work. I don't like how this, okay, so somehow, okay, I think now it will hopefully, yeah, I don't like how this line here gets so long, but we'll be fine. Most likely we don't need this now, because now it should know what's going on, because now these clone message, yeah, so now it's happy. Okay, so now instead of having to pack everything ahead of time, we actually just clone it. And you might think like, oh, this is slow, but we don't send the message all the time. And cloning is actually not that slow. If you look at like how many, it's just basically if you count it all together, it's probably per per player. You know, be busy cloning what we. So this is one scalar value that we just copy, and then here this one has 4, right? This one has 2, so we are now up to like 7, 8, 9. So it's like 9 values. That like doesn't take any time at all. And for the bullet model is even less, right? So. Okay, so now I want to see if that fixes something. So we restart the server with this change. Because now basically what's happening, right? So when we clean up, we take the current game state and we modify it, but the thing is that the one that we are sending is a clone of it. So the one we are sending is sure, and you know, now we are sure that it's not going to be affected by anything that we do to the other game state. So let's see if that fixes things. So we're moving. All right. Did we see some? No, we still don't see anything. Okay, but it's not bad to clone it anyways. I like this better. At least we see on our own player, we see the thrust. I still am not sure why we don't see it on the other player. So here we also see it on that player, but we don't see it on the other. And you see we need collision on, you know, for players. Right now they can just fly over on top of each other. There's still some things to be done. I think for now we'll just put it to rest. But just put it to rest. I'll see. I'll try to find out later why this is not applying. For now, I basically want to check this in because we are showing thrust. We didn't do that before, and we are cloning. So let's just get some things out of the way here. So bullet model. This was all part of the clone. So let's see what. So the player model also was part of the clone, and then the game model as well. Oh, hold on, the game state, right? So the game state, let's see where the game state is, here. So here we basically implemented cloning, right? So let's just add those all together to a check-in. Right, so we implemented clone. Let's just not, let's just fix that. We're not going to check in the changes to the server to actually use that clone functionality. Hold on, did that not? What's happening? Somehow it didn't check it in. What's going on here? Yeah, no, it did check it in, it seems like. Yeah, game state, all these things are gone. So now we have this cleanup thing that we added, and that basically fixed the so this update immediately thing, I almost want to remove that part. So before we check in, I actually want to get rid of that. That didn't work, and so we'll remove it for now. To not have any code there that doesn't serve any useful purpose. And so that was in the game. What's in the game state, maybe? Yeah, so actually what I'm going to do is I'm going to amend the game state to the current commit. So let's see. So let's see. Oh, and what I should have done, and I failed to do that. I should have tagged this one. I'll set that tag later, but basically we'll tag this one as a start of this episode. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to add the game state commit, the other stuff to change in there. Oh, it's this. Okay, so I'm going to amend that because that's we don't want to have that thing that we're removing. Basically, we don't want to have that as part of the commit. So now we can check this in. So let's just see. So we basically did implement some cleanup. Okay, we're cloning the. Basically, this is our attempt to. So this one we don't want to check in, but this is basically our attempt showing thrust, right? So player showing thrust animation currently only working for our player. All right, so what I actually want to do is I want to go back and I want to put a note here that this is not really working yet. So somehow Alright, so that's, we just put that here, and I'm actually going to amend that as part of this commit. So amend it. Okay. So what's next? I think for now we're going to call this complete for this episode. In the next episode, so now we actually have, 2 players moving. This is pretty cool. We can see our own thrust. In the next episode, I think what I'll focus on is getting the bullets, right? So when a player shoots, I want to see those bullets. And obviously, these bullets need to be added to the game simulation, so the server will, basically track the bullets, and then we can see not only the bullets that we fired, but also the bullets that someone else. Right now, we can see no bullets at all because I think we just disabled it for now. But we can basically now fly around. We can see other players. So this is already pretty cool. So now we can see the other player coming in. I kind of like that. It's not too janky. The rotation is really weird. I don't know if you noticed, but sometimes I'm rotating and it jumps a little bit. That is due to the way the server kind of gets these updates later, but we'll look at that. For now, it kind of works nicely. What we might do is, like, whenever the server sends a different rotation, we might actually not accept it and send back our own rotation, or we might just like slowly correct our rotation to match the servers, something like that. But yeah, I think this is good. So again, make sure to watch the next episode if you want to see how we fire bullets. So thank you very much for watching.